Hello, beautiful moms and entrepreneurs. My name is Sharice Walker, and I'm your host of the Unbreakable Mompreneurs podcast. This is a place where we come together to learn, grow, and inspire. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. Hello, Unbreakable Mompreneurs. My name is Sharice Walker, your host, and today I'm here with Sally Ivester. And she is genius because getting a corporate job sometimes can be tough. And if you're currently in that or you're working on that as your full-time W-2 position so you can do a side hustle in your entrepreneurship, well, she's going to tell you how to fast track that. So Sally, without further ado, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Sharice. And I'm so excited to be here. As you mentioned, I'm Sally. I currently have a big full-time job right now. I'm a chief of staff at a big tech company. But I also have two young kids at home, 4.5 and 2-year-olds. And then also a husband who I cannot forget. That's super important. And of course, my lovely side hustle. And what it is that I'm doing on the side, it's really coming out of passion. I am obsessed with how do we teach those who are either early in their career or in the middle of their career? What are these unspoken rules that ultimately help us play this corporate game better? And if people don't know yet, or you haven't experienced it, the corporate job is a game. And you can either play this game on easy mode or on hard mode. Easy mode is what I call going into it, knowing the blueprint, knowing like what you need to think about so that you can avoid the messy trial and error. And that's not to say you're not going to face it, but when you go into it knowing the rules and what to do, you're probably better off playing a better game and being more successful. And that's really my goal of teaching others. And the reason I care about that is I didn't know it. And Sharice, you would think I would because I went to an Ivy League school. I figured things out. I'm a high achiever, all of this stuff. But none of that mattered actually when I got into the work. And that is, I'm sure, not a mistake that only myself makes, but I think others do too who are high achievers. And so it's all about how do we figure things out together and then collectively learn from each other.
And I agree with that because, I graduated or college, and this is a long time ago, so I'm dating myself, but I opened up the classified ads in the newspaper, which doesn't exist anymore, and looked at jobs and got a job that way because when you graduate, they don't really help you. They
Totally.
do a much better job now, but they didn't back then. And so I'm like, okay, so I just got this 4-year degree and now I'm going to go be an office manager, but I was basically a glorified receptionist. And so I moved into different positions, and pretty soon I was in the corporate
Yeah.
role. But I learned how to play the game, which you do talk
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
And my husband, he actually a couple months ago, he lost his job, and I told him, I said, it's because you don't play the game. And
Mhm.
he's like, what game? And I said, so for you, you think that everyone should just, this is the way it needs to be because
Yeah.
this is what makes sense. And I go, so what I'm about to tell you is going to be foreign. And so I'm starting to tell him and describe the things. He's like, that's
Totally.
just stupid.
Totally.
Because he
Totally.
doesn't play that way. And so he is, as I told you, he's getting his first management position. He's like for 19 years, he's been doing this other stuff and has loved it, but now he's moving into a management role. And
Yeah.
I'm nervous for him. He's
Yeah.
not, but I am because until you've been in that, it's hard to know.
Totally. Totally.
So, what is that corporate job game?
Yeah. Yeah. And before I jump into that, I do want to jump on something, Sharice, which is I think the game changes too,
I agree.
depending on if you're an individual contributor,
Mhm.
if you are a middle level individual contributor or a man, the game totally changes when you're a manager, and the
Mhm.
game changes again when you're an executive, right? And so I think that this is a job where you're always going to have to learn new things. Now we have AI, and quite honestly, I use AI all the time as a chief of staff. Like it helps me. I could not live without it. And but these are the types of things that just change things. But as your husband thinks about being a manager, or as other listeners think about like the game, it all changes depending on what position you're in. And what I love to talk about is when you're an individual contributor, just because I feel like those are skills that you're going to need for life. Knowing how to do things like think ahead, knowing how to manage up, those are not going to be things that you forget about once you become a manager or an executive. They just become more glorified. And so that's really the area that I hone in on, but I just want to make sure that people know this is a game that constantly evolves like a chameleon. But Cherise, repeat your question again, just because I want to make sure I answer
So,
it directly.
so I think that you did, because it changes. But what is the game
Yeah,
that
yeah,
happens in corporate?
yeah, totally. The way that I talk about this game is essentially, do you know what the goal is? right? And the way I talk about the goal is the goal for me, and when I talk to all the people that I mentor and coach is the goal of the corporate game is to hit your career goals faster, right? Like that is ultimately like what our high level 30,000 foot view, just ideal looks like. And when you break it down, when you're like in the very beginning stages of reaching that goal, and a good job could be, oh, I just want people to think I did a great job on my project, right? Like I want a pat on the back. I want that gold star. But do you know what the advanced version of that looks like? It's when the next opportunity comes down the line, they think of Charisse,
Yeah.
right? Or they think of Sally, or they think of whatever. And so ultimately, to reach your career goals faster, you got to do a kick butt job on your current projects. But there's so much more to that that allows you to then be the first person they think about when a new project comes down the line. And that's ultimately what it is that we want to unpack. And for me, knowing this is what sets you apart from others. Now, I call it my pitch framework, but I think there's really 5 parts. And this is really the formula of how I think you can reach those career goals faster. The first one is how you present yourself in your work. The second one is how you think about impact. And when I think about impact, it's like the results. Executives just care about results, right? Results are synonymous with impact, and impact is what you do in order for you to make this project better. Then you think about the feedback that you get. And then I got to tell you, I was crap at taking feedback early on in my career. And that is the one thing that I have had to work so much, like so hard at, right? Like, how do I take feedback? How do I not think of its personal attack on myself? And what are like sort of the guardrails I put up and what I tell myself in order for me to be able to take on like negative feedback? The fourth part is what I like to call how you collaborate with your coworkers because everyone needs a work tribe. And then finally, I call it all hail your manager because your manager is your number one most important person. So you need to make them your advocate. And that for me is pitch, presenting yourself in your work, impact, taking feedback, collaborating with coworkers, and all hail your manager. And that is your formula for how you nail the corporate job as someone who is an individual contributor. We go into a lot of jobs thinking, oh, I just need to do what they tell me. That's not the way that you become the person that they think about when the next big cool opportunity comes into play. Right? If we break that down, it's like you can't just be told what to do. Executives don't wait to be told what to do. It's all about how do you move these projects forward? How do you ensure that you're being seen as a strategic thinker? How do you give options? We'll talk about this a little bit, Sharice, but I think people are lazy. I'm lazy. You're probably not lazy, but like we just sort of want to be told what are the options? Like if there's a traffic delay from my house to the grocery store, what are my 3 new options and what's the recommendation that I should take? Right? Like we just sort of want to be told that versus going into like our maps and trying to figure out what are the 3 different options now and all of that stuff. And for me, those are the types of things that you may not know about going into a corporate job just because I don't think college teaches you these rules. College is great, but you don't have that type of stuff in the corporate world. And the last part I'd say is the tangible reason I think the corporate job is so different is because in school, we were told essentially if you pass the beginner class, you then go to intermediate. If you pass the intermediate, you then go into advanced. That doesn't exist in a corporate job, right? Like this forward motion doesn't exist without you, and you are the one who helps drive it. And the more that you lean in, the more that you can do, then you can hit your career goals faster. And when I talk about a lot of this kind of stuff, what I what I think you get out of it is you're seen as a strategic thinker, right? Not just a junior employee, which I think is critical. The second component is that it gives you leverage. Leverage being defined as how I can do more with the current tools that I have. If I am creating more value, if I am doing more and I've been seen as a strategic thinker, I have more leverage. And when you have more leverage, you build your reputation, and your reputation is ultimately what opens doors to the new opportunities and everything that comes down the line. So that is, I think, Charisse, is a long-winded way of answering your question, but I think that all sort of like gets unpacked. And what are we thinking about when it comes to this game, and how do we make sure that we do what we can control to make sure that we maximize this game and reach the results that we want?
And I think that that is critical because, you're teaching people how to climb that corporate ladder, and some entrepreneurs might be saying, "But I'm an entrepreneur. How
Yeah,
does this
yeah,
relate to me?" But I want it does, because if you've ever been in a management position, and if you're starting now, you're wanting to scale your business, you need to now identify people that are like this, that are wanting to. Because I remember I started teaching at 22. I started teaching college, and there was a group of us. There was like four people that after our classes, we got done at 11 o'clock at night. It was a
Yeah.
4 hour class that we teach, and when we got done, we would literally sit outside in the parking lot. And I won't give the name of the school, but it was as the blah, 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 turns. And so we were
Yeah.
using it. I don't know if there used to be a soap opera called As the World Turns. And so we used to say as the, and the name of school turns. And so we would sit there and like visualize all these changes we would
Yeah.
do if we were in control. And
Yeah.
you want employees like that, because if you look at it, all of us ended up getting into becoming the dean, becoming a director, which is basically the president of the campus, and all of us these management positions. And it's because we were observant, we were watching what was going on, we were coming up with new ideas that were working, we were on the front lines, so we knew what the students liked or didn't like. And so same thing can go if you're the manager or the owner of the company, looking for people who have different perspectives and ideas that could help grow your company. And if you're a person that's wanting to continue to move up, I think that is one of the most important things. Is I used to manage or direct some nursing schools, and
Hmm.
they had a course in there called critical thinking.
Yeah.
And I wish that people would take that more and learn, because you're right. In college, here's your basic, here's your
Yeah.
prerequisite to the next level, and then to the next level. But you just moved up. There was no, okay, you're in it because now you know this and there's a foundation. But if you can continue to build, and the way you do that is continuing to see, okay, what's around the corner that I can't see? What could be coming up?
Totally, totally. And I think what you're talking about, Sherry, there's a few parts I want to add on and build on. One is I think you're talking about this idea of thinking ahead,
Yes,
right? And I
absolutely.
have a formula for that. And everyone has their own, but I think this one makes you come off as a thought leader. I anticipate these options and my recommendation is X, right? I anticipate a traffic delay because we're leaving at 4 p.m. or whatever that would be.
Mm-hmm.
These are three options: path A, path B, path C. And my recommendation is path C, right? Like you want people to do that for you, right? Like you want employees who do that because then you're not the one who always has to be thinking. But I think the other component in terms of like why should entrepreneurs care is I think all of us have the same goal, which is we need to be selling, right? You could say, hey, I'm only strategy, right? It doesn't matter. Everyone is selling. No matter what you're doing in life, you're always selling. You're selling yourself, you're selling your work, you're selling the results, you're selling like all this stuff. And what I sort of want everyone to know as an early career is you're selling, right? And you're selling how you're making results. You're selling your reputation. You're selling like all of these different types of components. And ultimately, all of us are entrepreneurs in that aspect because all of us own our reputation. All of us own like our own brand. And at the end of the day, that is what gets us hired for a new role, whether that be an entrepreneur hiring us or us becoming an entrepreneur and others wanting to like work for us or anything like that. So I totally agree with you in how you're thinking.
I also like that you talk about the impact, because you
Mhm.
have to create a name for yourself. And like my husband, I named him the fixer, because anytime that
Yeah.
they ever had any issues where somebody left or they let somebody go, they'd bring him in. And that could be him going to, I mean, the East Coast, the West Coast, or here in Utah where we're at. And so he was this fixer person. And so
Yeah.
whenever there's an issue, they would go to him. And so I think that figuring out what you're good at, what you enjoy, and then going from there. Ben Hardy talks about 2x or 10x is easier than 2x, and how you
Totally.
hire people to focus on those specific things. And that's where you can continue to promote yourself, which pitch yourself, and continue to be able to get seen, heard, and then progress.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, what's so interesting about what you talk about there too, Charisse, is this idea of your husband being the fixer.
Yeah.
Look, I think there's a lot of glory that gets put on an innovator. But I personally think a fixer is more important, right? Because I don't care about people who launch products or whatever. You can launch whatever. It's all about how do you make sure it constantly runs or how do you make it better, right? And sometimes we just move on to the next sexy thing. And I don't think that's the right way of doing it. Now, in my experience with fixers, because I tend to be one, I'm a chief of staff. And so we do a lot of fixing in that type of world, is a lot of it's unseen.
Yeah.
right? I would say 20% of my work, my VP doesn't know about because it never gets to her level because I'm proactively thinking about it and I'm trying to fix it before it ends up on her plate.
Hmm.
But I do not let that be a thing she doesn't know about, right?
Right.
Like I constantly talk about this concept, which is work loudly. And we talked about in the beginning, what is the corporate job or what's the game or what are the rules? We don't ever get told to work loudly in college. We need to work loudly in a corporate job. And whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a corporate employee who has a W-2 or anything like that, all of us need to work loudly. What is it that we're doing? How are we advocating for ourselves? What is the visibility that we're providing to like the impact that we're making? All of that becomes super critical. And we need to find ways that feel right for us because some of it can be a little bit cringe, stealing some Gen Z language, even though I'm not Gen Z. And it can make us feel like, oh, I don't want to be like a teacher's pet, or I want my work to speak for itself.
Hmm.
And look, I think all of that is admirable. But in today's world where you have to fight for a job, where you have to like build your reputation, you need to work loudly so people know what is the impact that you're making and people can see how you're moving things along. Because I talk a lot about psychology too in a lot of my work, Charisse, and I think the concept that I have here is you're no one else's number one priority except for yourself,
Hmm.
right? Like no one's going to seek you out, Charisse, right?
Right.
But unless you put yourself out there and you talk about all of the things that you're doing, and I think that applies to a W-2 employee or an entrepreneur or a working mom or anything like that.
And I love that because in a day of Instagram and YouTube and Facebook and all these different social medias that are there,
Yeah,
people, the way that you get the attention is by promoting yourself and talking. And our
totally.
generation, we were told that if you do that, then you're being, conceited. And
Yeah,
it's not the case anymore. And I think it doesn't hurt to say, hey, I just want to let you know, here's what's going on. I've already taken care of it, but I just want you to be aware of it. And that could be the way you do it. It's
yep,
something simple and easy, but they're aware because again, if they get blindsided, they're going to come to you and say, why didn't you tell me? And
yeah,
so sometimes it's good to just, and an email is even working if you can't get to them. It's, hey, I
yeah,
just want to let you know because I'm busy or you're busy.
yeah,
This is what's happened and here's how it's been handled. So that,
yeah.
oh, wow, good. I didn't have to worry about that.
Yeah. And you know what? That saves time, right? And our most valuable resource is time.
Right.
And as an entrepreneur, it's like, okay, great. I have a million things I have to do. And so now if someone told me, hey, Sharice, I just want to notify you, I got this handled, right?
Mhm.
Like, that's like great. Awesome. Now I don't have to use my mind capacity to think about that. I also don't have to physically write a text or an email or like reach out to Sharice to figure that out. And then I bet you as an entrepreneur, you're going to like that person because that person is telling you things and they're thinking ahead and they're keeping you updated, but in a way that doesn't take so much energy from you. Sharice, what you talk about just is what I like to call the notify email, because I actually think meetings should be for discussion or they should be for like some type of decision that needs to be made, but they should not be for Sharice. Here are the 12 things that I did.
Mhm.
No one has time for that, right? And I think when you're a junior, a lot of people are like, look at all the things I did. But you know what? No one cares about the number of reps. They care about the results, right? Like it's not about how, like the Olympics just passed.
Mhm.
It's not about how much you practice. That matters. But at the end of the day, it's like, did you show up? Were you able to land that? Were you able to like get the results? Because we're a results oriented culture. Doesn't mean we can't always get better, but like we care about that result. And in the workplace, there are ways you can do that. I love to send a notify email where I literally write notify in the subject line. And then I write like whatever context that would be. And then I would write some details. And then that's it. And I send it. And they don't have to reply. But now the best thing is I know that it was sent and I know that I covered my butt. I call it CYA, which is cover CYA, cover your butt. But ultimately, I have it on paper. These are things that happen and I can reference it again, which I think we all need to start really like doing and building our muscle. By the way, it also works for your personal relationships too, where you like send a text message to your husband. You're like, these are the things that we talked about. And I think in a physical workplace where you actually see people, I call that the drive-by. I had a boss before who was excellent at keeping his boss's boss up to date on things,
Mhm.
right? And it wasn't like, oh, grabbing time or anything. He noticed when his boss's boss was going to run to another meeting or getting a quick coffee, and he would physically get up, be like, hey, I just want to let you know, like, here's some three things that we're talking about, or hey, like, we just got this from our creative agency. What do you think of it, or whatever? That was brilliant of him because he is catching someone just like in a casual moment. And that allows him to talk about things that that they're already thinking about. It gives him exposure to people who are two levels above him. And it means that he's top of mind for his boss's boss. And so when new opportunities come up, guess who's going to think about? He's going to think about my old boss. So those are all different things that I speak about in my corporate game course. But this is what it comes down to. What do we need to know, which I think is the pitch framework, and then what are the tangible things that you can tactically do immediately to just help you like be that person who is seen as a strategic thinker and not a junior employee.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, however, there's a thing called the Peter Principle. Are you familiar with it?
No, tell me.
Teach. So Peter Principle is you're promoted to your level of incompetence. So say that this person gets promoted because they've been there for 20 years, or because they're BFFs with somebody, or because just insert whatever excuse.
Yeah.
They're not qualified for it, but they are qualified. Actually, they're not. And so they're like really good at their job, but they don't have a lot of experience at the next level. So they're promoted and all of a sudden they just tank. They're
Yeah.
horrible. And so how do you, I mean, I'm sure you've seen that in your experience.
Yeah.
How do you take somebody, or how do you recommend the person that's like that, that they really do want to do a good job, they just don't have the skills, that they're not quite sure how to manage?
Yeah.
What do you recommend for those people?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a great question. Normally, it's an interesting one because usually, Charisse, like what I've seen is you have to be operating at the next level to get the promotion. Usually, you don't get promotions until like, you don't just I think Charisse would do a great job. Usually, it's like, Charisse, you're kicking butt at that like next level or two levels already, so I'm going to give it to you. But I think in the case where maybe you're a Nepo baby, right? I'm just going to call it right there. I'm using Gen Z language because I just recently heard about it on TikTok.
Yep.
I think in those cases, this is where your manager comes in. Right. Like you can't fake it that you're doing a great job when you're not doing a great job. And I think you have to be really honest about this is what the job requires. These are the areas that I think I'm doing really well in. These are the 12 areas that I don't think I'm doing really well in. Here are some thoughts I have in terms of what we can do next. What do you think? And how can you work with me together? And this is why I say, like, your manager is your most important person because ultimately they're going to dictate your performance review, your projects, like your promotion, like all of that kind of stuff. And it is their job to help you figure out how to do better. Because ultimately, you're going to be a reflection of them. Like they are personally invested in you and making sure you do better because if you do a bad job, it may be like a sign on them. And so that would be the way that I would handle it. But you have to go in with honesty. And I would also say you have to go in with some self-reflection. You
Right.
can't just like have it be, what should I do? It needs to be, here's like a diagnosis of what I'm thinking. Here are the things that I think we should be doing. What else do you think? Like, or what do you think of my approach? Or what else am I missing? And, help me figure that type of stuff out. And the reason I think that becomes important is because you're accepting the feedback or you're accepting that you're not in like the next level position yet. And then you're offering ways that you're acting on it. And that combination is always going to be winning because it shows that you're like invested in making it better. And you're not just someone who's going to be listening, but you're invested in how you're thinking about it and you have some skin in the game.
Yeah, totally love it. And I could talk to you all day about this because I'm passionate about it and I love it. And I really do want people to realize that they have the ability and they're capable and they need to just start to trust themselves and step into it. And I think some people are worried about that. And I think whether it becomes your entrepreneur, whether that becomes a W-2 type
Yeah.
position, which just, entrepreneur can have a W-2, but,
Good to know.
it's just important to make sure that you're listening to that. And all the advice that you've given is essential because you can apply it in so many different ways. And like business is just one of my passions. And I really could honestly talk for days about it. And so I'm glad that you came on and I'm glad that you talked about it. And you mentioned a course that you have. So if our
Yes.
listeners wanted to learn more, how would
Yeah.
they find you?
Yeah, go to sallyivester.com. I have a Maven course. It's a 4-week cohort, an hour a week, where we dive into these particular areas I talk about. And we make it really tangible and you see results. We just kicked off yesterday on Thursday, September 5th, but we always have recordings and you get these for life. And I've already gotten great reviews just in terms of like how tangible it is, how impactful, and how it honestly, it opened up their eyes to like things that they haven't thought of before. So that's my goal is just how do I continue delivering value for everyone else?
I love that. Okay, so before we finish, I just have to ask. I see your cute drawings in the back.
Yeah.
So we talked about you being a mom. I want you to think about you sitting on a park bench and this 9-month pregnant woman comes up and sits right next to you. what advice would you give her? And it doesn't have to be just being a new mom. It could be anything. And it could be a working mom, like
Yeah.
anything that you want to give. What
Yeah.
advice?
I love it. I give this to everyone. You need to invest in other people helping you.
Yes.
I have a full-time job. I got these two young kiddos and I got this like side gig. I'm not doing it all, right? And I think like we can't do it all. I have help. I have like an au pair who helps us. I have like kids in preschool. You have to have some help. And I think like when you're a new mom, you sometimes go into it like, I can do it all, but you really shouldn't think that you can do it all because you can't take care of a newborn baby. You can't like manage a household. You can't be cooking everything and then like cutting the grass and doing all of this kind of stuff. Like that's just not possible. And so I think for all of us, especially for entrepreneurs too, you can't do it all. There are certain things that you probably should outsource. And then there are things that you should be spending time on because it is like how you are the only one who can do it. And that will make your business more successful. So I'm all about, you should just think about how to get help in ways that help you scale yourself.
I love that advice because I am one of those that thinks I can do it all and
Yeah.
I have managed it, but it's not effective. You could be so much more. You could be like accomplish so much more. And I was sitting on a training because I do invest in myself and learning more all the time. And they were talking about how, okay, so what is something you hate to do? Like for me, I hate to clean the bathroom.
Yeah.
So how much is it going to cost me to hire somebody to clean that bathroom? Okay, now I need to go sell to be able to pay for that person. And so it's those type of things, if you can think of it a different way, that
Yeah.
how much is your time worth and
Yeah.
how much is that going to cost you? So if your time is $50 an hour, $100 an hour,
Yeah.
$200 an hour, $20 an hour, and you can hire a high school person to
Yeah.
come and clean your bathroom for $10 an hour, guess what? You just made money.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? You created value, right? Like there's value for everyone. They're a win-win because you know what? They just made $10, right? And you're a win-win because now you can use that hour to
Mhm.
then spend time doing something that allows you to drive more success for your business or like dive deep into a work time or anything like that. I totally am aligned with you, Charisse.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fantastic advice. Take it, listeners.
I love it.
Well, thank you so much, Sally, for coming on the show. You have such great advice, and it's so important, especially in today's world. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun. Like you, I could probably talk about this for hours. So I really appreciate you having me on.
No, I appreciate that. And listeners, like I said, whether it's you or whether you're trying to train people in your business, it's okay to ask for help. First of all, take some help and really learn to play the game in the corporate
Yeah.
world, because if you do, you're going to be so much more successful and happier. And I'm sure your pocketbook will be as well. So go out and make it a great day. See you later. Beautiful moms, remember, you are unbreakable. Keep illuminating the world with your strength, pursuing your dreams, and reveling in the splendor of motherhood. This is Charisse Walker, bidding you farewell for now. Stay tuned for more empowering conversations on the next episode of the Unbreakable Mompreneurs podcast. Until then, keep shining bright. Signing off with love, Charisse Walker.